G'day rugby players, welcome to the Axe Physio channel. Have you ever wondered what are the best core exercises to do as a rugby player? And you would be forgiven for being a little bit confused because there's so many different exercises out there. But I just think, what do we need to do? We need to ruck, we need to scrum, we need to tackle. So I put together a list of exercises starting at easy, working our way up to hard, that'll help you develop strength in those positions. So guys, if at any point in time in this video you do like what you see, if you do think you've learned something, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel so that we can continue to grow together and I can keep putting out more rugby content for you. As we go through this video, I want you to pause it, get on the ground, do the exercises and see where you're at, because we're starting easy, getting up to hard, and you might find that the third exercise is where you need to start, or it might be that you can just crack on with the hard stuff at the end, but you won't know until you try. So feel free to pause that video, practice those exercises and see which one is your starting point, and then work your way through those as the weeks go by. So guys, we're going to learn how to control our core in that hinge position. We're going to get better at rucking, scrumming and tackling. So let's get into that first video now.
First exercise is pelvic tilts. We lie flat on our back and tuck our pelvis up so that we're flattening our back. That is a posterior tilt. And then anterior tilt is when we're arching our lower back by tucking our pelvis underneath us. Think about your tailbone. When we're trying to flatten our back out, the tailbone is going to lift off the ground. And then when we're going to arch our back, the tailbone is going to tuck back the other way. Work on controlling this motion smoothly and then finding a fairly neutral position and holding. Hold that position where your back is just about to start arching, because it's a nice strong position for a rugby player. I want you to hold that and then practice bending your knee out to the side and sliding your leg out forwards. Because we're moving our leg, it's making you have to control that pelvic position more, which means you're going to be strengthening and working on that control of those front pelvis muscles, so like our abdominals, our oblique muscles, as well as our hip flexors. We can then begin to work on some foot marches where we're lifting one heel off, lifting the other heel off, still control that exact same position from the first few exercises. Really great way just to challenge yourself more. Now the next progression from here is quite difficult. We get into what we call a tabletop position. We hold both legs in the air and tap one foot down at a time. This really works those lower abdominal muscles. You really have to work on controlling your pelvis in that neutral position. It's quite challenging. Don't let your back arch. You want to keep the back in that same position as to which you started on the ground. If you found that a little bit challenging, that much of a jump, you can just go to a straight leg raise where we work on having one leg on the ground, tucking that pelvis and just raising one leg up and down. You don't have to go all the way to the floor. Some people just can't get into that range. We still want to control that pelvic position so our back isn't arching and extending and flexing as we move the leg. Our back is staying in that exact same position. Then you can go back into your tabletop position and do leg reaches or leg lowers from that tabletop position. Now, this is a very hard exercise to do. You'll see lots of people do this in the gym, but what will happen is their pelvis will start to arch. So we want to keep that pelvis in the exact same position. From here, we can then add the arms into it. So this is called a dead bug, and this is really hard. I'm trying so hard to keep my pelvis in that exact same position. I'm not letting my back just overarch and letting my back muscles take over. I'm really trying to use my lower abdominals, using my oblique muscles, all those corset and core muscles that sort of surround the pelvis to control what I'm doing. So whilst we're working on those leg movements, I also want to work on the pelvis being controlled through movement as well. So we want to work on holding that pelvis in that same position it is on the floor as we raise up to the top. Now we don't want to get so far through the bridge that our back has to arch. You can see I'm stopping just below parallel because that's the end of my range. Maybe that's hip flexor tightness, maybe that's quad tightness. It doesn't really matter. As long as we're controlling that pelvis position, we're working on our abdominal muscles, that's all that matters. The progression for this exercise is holding that pelvis position and then doing some marches. Guys, this is really challenging and you'll be surprised at what high level players really struggle doing things like this. So make sure you work on that. Once we've done all those exercises, we can then start to move on to all fours in a full point kneel. So try to work on controlling that pelvis position in that slightly extended position, that slightly arched position, raising one arm up at a time, left then right, and then you can work on doing the same for the legs. Every time you lose your trunk position, reassess, go through arching and flattening of your back, find that slightly extended position, hold that position, and then start to repeat the reps. Work slowly through this. So in this position, really work hard on controlling that scrum position, that tackling position, that ability to control that pelvis in that slightly extended position that's going to allow you to push hard in a scrum, but we're not just jamming on our joints to do it. From here, we're going to get into a 4-point kneel and lift, holding that same scrum position. You can see this is going to be really important for people in the scrum. We can then work on doing our leg lifts, our heel lifts whilst in this 4-point kneel position. It's really challenging. Every time you stuff up a rep, go back, find that neutral, and then swap out one leg at a time, swap out one arm at a time. If you get really good, you can do both arms and legs. I couldn't do it. Not that I'm a gold standard, but I think that's really challenging. For most people, the next progression won't be both arms and legs. It'll be adding on an object in front that they'll then climb up onto. I'm using this Bosu ball. It's a little bit unstable with the surface. Makes you have to work that little bit harder. Makes the shoulders work hard as well. Really great shoulder exercise, this one. Just a nice progression for you to work on. From here, we're going to progress on to a bear crawl. This is a great exercise when done well. If we're holding our pelvis in the right position and we're moving correctly, keeping our hips as low as possible, keeping the knees as low as possible, we can eventually add weight to this or add a band around the hips to make it harder as well, and try to work forwards, backwards, laterally. So guys, I really hope this has demonstrated how we can progress through some exercises to get to a very sport-specific functional position for rugby. So finally guys, if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel if you've made this far, I'd be very grateful. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much for joining me.